Next, on this episode of The Nice Guys on Business.
We all get stuck inside the black box. And if you get yourself outside the black box and just focus on inputs and outputs, and this, by the way, this is the way technology people speak.
Right.
It really simplifies everything.
Well, off the top of my head, I'd say you're looking at a Boski, a Jim Brown, a Miss Daisy, two Jethros, and a Leon Spinks, not to mention the biggest Ella Fitzgerald ever. And, of course, you'll need the nice guys on business. Go from where you are now to where you could be. Get expert tips to grow your business, to be more productive and more efficient, whether you're trying to build influence, grow your community, or make it rain. Best-selling author of Nice Guys Finish First, Doug Sandler, can lead the way. The Nice Guys on Business is produced by Turnkey Podcast Productions. Now, here's your host, Doug Sandler.
So Nice Guy community, talk about a small world. When I was originally pitched to have today's guest on the show, I was immediately interested in this topic. And the topic is book publishing, by the way, but that's almost irrelevant based upon the friendship that we've been able to strike up. Book publishing is his game. Book publishing, though, for normal people like you and me. Fast forward about 2 months, I was sitting next to Mitchell, our guest, Mitchell Levy, at a conference and did not realize he was the same guy that had pitched me to come on the show. Actually, it was his assistant that pitched. Very good job on your assistant's behalf, because I never invite anybody on the show, Mitchell. So as he was talking at the conference, I kept thinking, I've got to have this guy and his message on my Nice Guy community, share with his message with you guys. Realizing as I'm sitting down this morning to go over the notes of my day today, realizing that Mitchell was a guest on the show today. So Mitchell Levy, he's a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author of over 60 books, 60 freaking books, get that, as the aha guy at ahathat.com. He helps to extract the genius from your head in a 2-hour interview so that his team can ghostwrite your book, publish it, distribute it, and make you an Amazon best-selling author in 4 months. Holy shit, I'm ready to talk to him. Mitchell, welcome to the Nice Guys on Business podcast.
I'm happy to be here. I'm also excited that my outsourced Pakistani person who's booking me on shows was able to convince to you that I was a nice guy before you knew me.
Hats off Sahir Tariq or Tariq Sahir, because that is his name. Or is it? Do you have any idea what his first name is? Tariq, or is it Sahir?
It's actually she's female, and it is you did pronounce it Sahir. I call her Seer, but it's probably is Seer.
No, you're probably right. So have you ever, it's interesting. So you work with a VA that is overseas. Now, have you ever had a chance to meet Sahir either through video or face to face?
Oh, so I meet with video with all the folks I work with. She's actually hired just for this purpose.
Wow.
She's got me on 180 podcasts in the last 18 months. My entire team is virtual. So she's in Pakistan. Most of my team is in Philippines. My programming team's in India.
Wow. And so we sat through, as a part of Jay Facette's program, one of the presenters there was talking all about VAs. And, I've never had a VA. I've had a lot of assistants that have worked with me and helped me through support, but they've all been local here. And I guess I haven't considered them VAs because they've had a specific purpose, and it wasn't admin. It was more of the production side of our podcast business. What's it like as a part of having I know this has nothing to do with the topic, but I'm really curious about it.
But it's an interesting question, particularly in the world that we live in. So actually the VA I started with 11 years ago is now my chief of staff. So at the moment, most of the time I now no longer call them virtual assistants, although they are, particularly if they're with you for a while. And there are ways in which, if you treat people, whether or not they're physically local or not, is irrelevant. What happens is humans are humans. And so last year, I actually took a trip to the Philippines. I met most of my team. We recruited new people. And that's the stage when I kind of figured out who people really were, gave people the appropriate promotions. And probably the most important thing, and let me help you with something that's going to help everyone who's listening.
Yeah.
And Doug, by the way, you too. It's going to help you with everything in
Mitchell,
life.
I'm so beyond help. You should know.
Well, by the way, that's absolutely not true. So for those who are listening, if you're driving, please don't do this, but come back to it. But if you're listening and you could bring out a sheet of paper, just on a sheet of paper, draw a box. Just could be in the middle of the sheet of paper. If you have a notepad, just draw a box.
All right, my box is now drawn. I dropped my pen, but I got it now.
And label it black box.
Okay.
And then on the left-hand side, draw a line into the box and call it input. And on the right-hand side, draw a line and label it output. So this is, I'm going to say something. I normally don't say this, but I have recently, my undergraduate degree was in stochastic and deterministic models of operational research.
Of course it was.
Of course. So
I was thinking about that, but I decided on radio, TV, and film instead.
So what happened, I was actually in the business school at University of Miami, and I said, hey, what's the hardest classes I could take? And it was taught through the industrial engineering school. And it turns out that I've been using content from my undergrad my entire life. Okay, so that's a little crazy. And this input-output diagram is what helped save me in terms of having virtual assistants. So it was 11 years ago. I went through starting 12 years ago, I went through 3 different VAs. And 8 months into it, I'm like, because here's what would happen. I'd get on a call. At the time it was Skype. I'd get on a Skype call and I'd talk. And I'd say, hey, listen, I'd like to have blah, blah, blah. And they'd look at me and go, I got it. We'll do blah, blah, blah. And I'd like you to deliver this by this time. And they'd go, okay. And then I'd go away and then they'd come back and they didn't give me what I asked for. And it was the third time around, I said, listen, I must not be doing something right. And all of a sudden the input-output diagram popped in my head.
Okay.
And I go, that's really fascinating. I said, how about we document what I would like? So we sat down together and we said, what is the input? And we wrote down exactly what we wanted as the input. And then instead of focusing on the black box,
right,
we focused on the output. We said, here's what the output should look like. I said, and for this first time, let's create the processes together. Let's create the black box together. So we used Google Docs and we created a workflow document. And by the way, we're now ISO 9003 certified.
Wow. Okay.
ISO 9003. We never got certified. And the interesting part is when you talk with another human that's brought up in another culture or another way or a different educational society, you say words and visually or orally or kinesthetically it feels different to them. And so they say yes, but you're not on the same plane. But if you have an input-output document, if you actually are able to talk to somebody and say, listen, I'm going to give you this and here's what I want as the output and here are the steps you need to go through. Oh my God, it makes life so much easier.
So you're leaving it to them to interpret what goes in or what makes up the black box. And you're not really, you don't care if it's a hamster in a wheel inside that black box, as long as it's something that when you give the input, they put it in the black box and the output is what your desired outcome is.
So theoretically, the answer to that's yes. But when you're working with virtual assistants, you're going to also fill out the black box.
Okay, so how is that any different than not having the diagram, but just understanding? So tell me, and I believe you. I think that this is a really helpful thing, and just kind of visualize how a set of tasks is actually accomplished when you hire a VA. But oftentimes, I find myself in that position where I'm saying, "Here's the input, here's how you do it, and here's the output." Anyway, isn't that what most people do, or do most people say, "Here's the input, you figure out what's in the black box, and just give me the output"?
No, what most people do is they talk about the process in the middle and they never even focus on the input and output.
Oh, I got it. So what you're introducing into the formula is the input and the output diagram, not the black box.
Hey, Doug, what was the first question? I'll this is rhetorical because I'll answer it. What's the first question I asked you once we realized that this was not something that we set up since we saw each other, a couple of weeks back? The first question I asked you is, hey, what would be a great output for your audience?
Okay.
Right? Because I'm sitting here in the input-output diagram. I'm thinking, well, you and I are input. We got a half hour together. That's our black box. We're going to navigate it however, you want to take me, which I'm much happier this way.
Right.
What's the output? And so everything I do, I do in that way. So whether or not we're talking about dealing with VAs, whether or not we're talking about somebody buying into your radio show, right into the the podcast capability of that you guys deliver, at the end of the day, what you need to describe. And I think what I'm mostly saying is we all get stuck inside the black box. And if you get yourself outside the black box and just focus on inputs and outputs, and this, by the way, this is the way technology people speak,
Right.
and it really simplifies everything.
Well, and I look at it very similar to you in that when I have a guest on a show, I always ask for people, hey, send me some questions that you think would be appropriate for me to ask you. And oftentimes I look after the interview is over and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't ask any of those questions because we get so wrapped up in the conversation. And I always feel like if you're listening to this, a Nice Guy community, you know who you are. You're the people that have been with me in some cases for over 5 years and listening to the show. And I always think about it and say, I don't know that you come for the answers to the questions outside of the fact that I think many of you come to see what kind of shit show is about to unroll. But on the other side of it, to know that you probably get some good information, even if it's not the information that you thought you came here for. Like my goal was to talk about, at some point, we're going to talk about publishing and why it's good for those in our community to maybe look at the services that you have, or maybe look at publishing in general as a way to have a high visibility, piece for them. But at the same time, it's like we could spend 2 minutes on that at the end. And, oh, yeah, Mitchell, what do you do? I do publishing. Great. Everybody contact Mitchell. Or we could spend the whole time talking about it.
Well, we could. But, hey, since we got this input-output diagram out there, let me say what I do from that perspective, right? So first, I will tell you what my input is. Busy, successful professionals looking for more credibility with a book, and they have no time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's my output? So imagine 4 months from today, after a 3-hour interview where we pull your genius, or where I actually extract a genius from your head, we have So here's the black box: ghostwritten, published, distributed, made you an Amazon best-selling author. And so the output is you're an Amazon best-selling author after 4 months, and you've spent 10 hours or less.
Right.
Well, that's interesting. And so what happens is the way I describe myself, 3 seconds up front, I call it my CPOP, my customer point of pain. And how I talk about what I deliver, it's another 3 to 5 seconds. And then we could jump into the black box. So why is it important to have a book? It's so funny. I haven't actually had to talk about that in a long time, but I'll do it super quickly. You're a credible expert. If you're an expert, if you have a book in your name, and by the way, here's the most important thing. I gave you my CPOP, my customer point of pain: busy, successful execs who want credibility with a book. So what's yours, right? And for those that are listening, what is the customer point of pain that you're addressing? And if you had a book whose title was your CPOP, like we used to do books that were focused on like 1-2 word titles, and they were very sexy, and then we try to market this sexy title, which was different than what you did. Well, why don't you bypass that part? And if the output is, let's assume one of the outputs of the process we have together is that you have something, when somebody goes to Amazon, somebody who doesn't know you, and they say, hey, I have a problem with, tell me what books are out there. What happens if what they typed in was the title of your book and your book pops up? Hey, we skip a step.
Right. Absolutely. It's very cool. I mean, I love your thought process, and I think that a lot of people don't even really put much time or energy or anything into just trying to figure out what the input and output or the black box are. They just know what they want the process to they're just looking at what I want a desired outcome of. I would like to have a best-selling book, or I'd like a book because I'm a professional speaker, or I would like a different credibility, something that would give me high visibility. And maybe a podcast is the way to do that. I don't even know that I necessarily focus on what do you call it? A CPOP?
Customer. Oh, by the way, you need to come on my show. I'm interviewing 500 thought leaders on credibility. I've hit 240 already, and I've got only 150 slots left. So we'll make sure you get on.
Yeah, I would love it. So I want to get into the meat of some of the stuff. And I know that it's not important to you to talk about anything that you do, because it doesn't really matter what you do, because we're going to build a great relationship, and my customers, my community is going to realize that. And hopefully by realizing that, they will want to hear more about what you actually do. So why don't we share just a moment just talking about, like, how does that process work? You have an interview with somebody, you spend a few hours with them, and then all of that stuff behind the scenes that most people don't care about. Can we just talk a moment or two about what that behind the scenes stuff is? Because I think it's fascinating to me. How do you do all that stuff?
Let's okay. So we're gonna dive into the black box.
Yeah, I want to get into the black box for a second because I'm like the kind of guy when I was 13 years old and in my house, I would always take apart all of the things that had some sort of digital or mechanical component because I always I was fascinated by the way things worked. I didn't know exactly how. I always put them back together, had a few extra parts. I never understood why the manufacturers would need to put extra parts in there.
And it still worked. That's amazing.
And they still work, exactly. So what are some of the pieces and parts of this process that we can share?
I'll bet you if you took apart an Apple phone, that wouldn't happen.
Oh, no. I don't even know. Can you take apart an Apple phone? I would love to try.
Technically not. I'm just saying if you decided it, because
with computer stuff, it doesn't really work the same way to me because there are no moving parts. There's nothing fascinating. Like I remember taking apart a Timex watch when I was probably 15 years old. And I was so fascinated to put on that loop or to use a magnifier glass and see all of the amazing parts. I had no idea how people put that together. So
that's amazing.
I'm assuming that there's got to be a lot of intricacies in what your team does behind the scenes.
Well, let's look at first. Let me define the output. What is a book?
Okay, cool.
Right. So in the old days, we were thinking. Old days meaning 20 plus years ago, books were these things you use in academia. They're 50 to 100,000 words. They take 1,000 hours for the author to write. You've got some publisher who has people who are selling book buyers and books getting to bookstores. And, none of that stuff exists anymore, right? There are sort of bookstores there, but everything we get is online. And because information now gets to us via podcasts, via YouTube, via other vehicles, the concept of a book is we're not using a book anymore to educate from steps A to Z, because what happens is by the time you've even written the book before it's published, it's out of date. So where we educate, where we let our audience, we teach them to go from A to B. That's your online course, right? So it's interesting is if you have a book that you're selling for $20, and you have an online course that you're selling for $200 or $500 or $1,000. Guess what? There's a whole lot more profit. Even if you sold a course for $20, there's a whole lot more profit because there's a convoluted book channel to sell a physical book.
Oh, yeah. My $20 book ends up being $2.75, if that, in my pocket after all said and done. And it's only about 4 months delay to get that. Right, in 4 months delay to get that money.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the interesting part. Now, that said, we've published over 850 books. I've written some nice royalty checks to some of my authors, but they're not doing it for the book sales.
Right.
What the book is for is the credibility.
Right. Absolutely.
What the book
100%.
says is I am an expert in the space that I'm playing. And because we are so quick to market, what's interesting is you can now start thinking about, well, maybe I should have more than one. And the answer is yes. This year, if this is your focus, if the focus is, for you, simply stated, why every entrepreneur needs to have a podcast, right? Or using your podcast to both build your list and close more revenue, right?
Those are going to be I got to figure out how to pull those two quotes out of that because I didn't write either one down, but I'm going to go back to the recording.
I think this is recorded, so you're okay. Yeah. But what happens, what you want to think about is, what is I'm going to jump in the middle, but this is the most important part of the black box. It's step one. I sit down with the author and we come up with the table of contents and the title, because that's the project management plan for the book.
Yeah.
Right. And so the title of your book, in essence, is I fine tune the customer point of pain. And that is, what is the pain point your customer has? Sometimes it's when the pain is solved, what do they want to accomplish? And so it could be a combination of those, but that's what, Doug, that's what we're doing. And so step one, the most important step is once we have a title, then what gets really interesting is I'll often say, hey, tell me about your black box. How do you solve that problem? And they say, we have a proprietary 5-step process to solve this problem. I go, great. Here's the title of the book, because it's a CPOP, and we have a 7-section book because it's the intro and the conclusion, and then the 5 steps in the middle, right? And they go, oh, that was easy. I go, yes, it was. Because, by the way, life should be easy. If you know the rules of the game, it's very easy. And the input-output really allows me to take a look at the rules of the game. So once we have the title and the table of contents, Then what happens is I set up a 3-hour interview. I used to do it in 2 hours, and 2 hours are really good when the human I'm interacting with is either visual or kinesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
But if the human is oral, then I need an extra hour.
Right.
and
right.
and at first I thought, I did my first couple of books with visuals, and I'm like, oh, this is great, 2 hours, I'm done. And now all my literature said 2 hours, and then I had an oral. I'm like, what's wrong? Why did this take 3 hours? And then I figured it out.
So talk to me for just a quick moment about some of the symptoms. And I always go through this as I talk to my guests on the show, because I really want to make sure that somebody can relate to the stuff that you're talking about, other than just say, hey, that sounds like a great idea. I want them to feel like, if they're feeling the pain, that this is you're the doctor to this. So what are the symptoms that somebody is generally experiencing when they should be picking up the phone or emailing you to call, hey, Dr. Mitchell Levy, can you help me solve my pain? So what are those symptoms?
What a beautiful question. You've been thinking about a book for 5 years. You've never been able to get to it. You've been writing your book and have 50,000 words, and you just will never get to closure.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a good one. Somebody on your team says you need a book, and all of a sudden a weight on your shoulder makes you drag yourself down. Let's see what else. There are many. You still have in your head the feeling that your stuff is so amazing. This is the negative, by the way. Your stuff is so amazingly cool. Once you write it down and put it in a book, it's going to sell more than the Bible. I'll just be clear. That's not going to happen. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I think what happens here's a good one. And this is not necessarily a symptom that manifests. You somehow, when you talk to people, they've got you thinking about unrealistic expectations of either how difficult it is to do or how invaluable it is because it had nothing to do with your business.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll just give you a very clear statement. The output, when we're done with a book, the output is an asset that's just part of your business. It should help you change who you are and what you do. It should help you think about things in a different way. And specifically, one of the things I thought I mentioned, Doug, is because most humans are not reading books these days. Now, by the way, when we do books, we do hardcover. Hardcover is pretty cool. Here, let me do something for the audience. Doesn't that sound like it's got a lot of content in it? That's a hardcover book that we did for someone.
That's valuable content too. That is hard, valuable content. I love that.
Exactly. So we do hardcover, we do Kindle, we do paperback. What happens, we finish the book process in 4 months. Then I introduce you to our audio guy, and he helps you do your audiobook. So 7 months down the road, when a prospect types in their CPOP and they come up with your book, they're going to see the Kindle, paperback, hardcover, and Audible version.
Let me ask you something about that, because I remember when I had originally I wrote a book in 2015 called Nice Guys Finish First, and the book did really well on Amazon as a paperback. And then my publisher said, "Hey, why don't we go into the studio and have you record it and do an Audible version of the book?" And I went back in. I think I did this all on my own. I went to a recording studio, and I think it was like $2,500 or $3,000 or something like that to record the book, and it did okay. But is there a way that now I can't get that book? I mean, it's over on Audible. How do I get, or do you give people copies of? Do they own the material? Does the publisher own the material? How does that work for them?
Oh, that's a great. Well, you have two questions. I can't help you on your side. My
right,
guess,
of course,
because that's whatever deal you did with your publisher.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
With us, we distribute the audiobook in 23 plus locations. Plus, if you want access to it, you can have all the files. Right. So we are the way we do our deals with our authors is the author owns 100% of the copyright. And because we maintain ownership as the publisher, we then do P&Ls because we distribute in 80 plus locations, and the author receives 51% of profit. Not that you're doing a book to make money, but one of the things that's interesting, Doug, is because most of what we do are actually, I think almost everything. Yeah, everything we do is print on demand. I was going to say we've done a couple off.
Well, isn't even Amazon print on demand? I know they have a handful of books
Amazon has a print on demand version as well. But no, not all books are print on demand these days. There's still, if you're going to be doing a book with a large company and they're buying 2,000 plus copies, then you want to
we
do
should be so fortunate.
Right. So I've got a pitch a proposal I was working on right now, which is about 10,000 copies. Right. So
Wow.
so there we'll do offset, but most of the books are print on demand. Here's the cool part: with a print on demand, with the services we use, we can print a copy of one, and when we do a copy of one, and economically it's still the author price. When we do a copy of one, we can do a custom page one. So imagine you are doing a speaking event and you're in front of 30 people. Well, you can actually create a custom version. Or the event we were at, there was 70 people in the room.
Yeah.
You can do a custom version of your book that specifically has a sponsor. So it could be Jay Facette is on page 1 of the book with a special note because you were in front of his audience.
Right.
And you now this is the important part to think about. You hand your book and then autograph it for everyone in the room.
Yeah.
You're not selling your book. And that's what people need to get over. It's not about, this is the most beautiful opportunity for you to take. Like when you go to an event, like how many business cards did I get from JVology? Quite a few. How many have I acted on? Not as many.
Right.
How many assets do I have that actually sit on my desk? Well, from JVology, actually, there's nothing that's sitting on my desk at the moment. But every time somebody gives me a book, guess where that sits?
Yeah.
Sits on my desk.
It is really cool. When you do have a book, it is a showpiece and it is an opportunity for you to be top of mind for people. I know that I go to my bookshelf and I have a bookshelf immediately to the right of my desk. And if I'm doing some Mondays and Wednesdays, I do some inspirational reading just for a few minutes in the morning with my girlfriend, and we sit down, we do some visualization. And part of it is finding some motivational phrases out of books. So I pull a number of books, and I love obviously I love when I pull my own book, but I love just to have the resource to go. And these aren't popular named authors. These are mostly authors that have sent me their books through the interviews that I've done with them on Nice Guys on Business. And those tend to be the people that I build these relationships with because I have their book. I understand what they're all about. At least I have some motivational phrases from them. And it is a showpiece and a top of mind, marketing piece that you can have that will forever sit on my bookshelf until my bookshelves get filled, which happens every couple of years, and I have to do a refresh of my bookshelf. But I love the idea of having a book. And can you tell me generally, and I know this is a really hard statement to back up, specifically for somebody that's listening in our audience that may not know you or you may not know them, but generally, what would somebody expect to have as, let's say, an ROI on something like this? I mean, if they're investing $5, $10, $15, $20,000 in a book opportunity, do you see this as a profitable or as a winning proposition for them, or is it more as an ego piece for them?
Let's see. I'm going to answer your question. Is it ego? For some people, it's partially ego.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an ROI? Typically not on direct sales. So when you're doing a book, your expectation. So if you have a book and you don't have anything to sell other than the book, I'd consider doing something different.
Doing something. Yeah, right? Yeah. There's very rare that somebody, and Nice Guy community, you know this, I've been pounding this at you for the last several years, is do not write a book if you want to get rich from the book, unless you're Stephen King or Scott Turow or any of our Dean Koontz. Right. That's not going to be the case.
Let me tell you something interesting. So let's talk about you. We did that book that we talked about, and that is, let's see. As a entrepreneur, my podcast made me X amount of money, or I can be a effective entrepreneur, run a podcast and still build my list and make money.
Right.
So long title, but let's say we did that.
Okay.
So what happens is you should, while we're doing the 4-month effort, you should come up with your dream 100. So our authors who have, I'm going to tell you a little bit of inside the box of what people have done.
Yep.
And the output has been a 2 to 10x increase of the amount of money they've made as a business owner. Are you ready?
All right.
Okay.
So say that again.
So while we're doing our part, come up with your dream 100.
Okay.
The 100 prospects. So in this case, it'd be successful entrepreneurs you see that don't have a podcast.
Correct. So so what you're saying to me is who's on my top 100 list of people that I would think would be great at podcasting that don't have a podcast currently?
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So I'm writing with their addresses.
And I'm writing a book with you about the effectiveness of podcasting as a tool.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so
got
it'd be something along the lines. It'd be a title that would be so catchy they're going to have to pop it open and look inside.
Okay, got it. All right. So forget the title for a second, but my job is to write a book about the effectiveness of podcasting. You're telling me to come up with and that's what the interview is about. While the 4 months is going on, ticking off, I'm now working on trying to figure out who those top 100 people are that I want to interview that I think would be key prospects for my business.
Yeah. Now you said it properly. You're writing the book, but actually we do all the work for you.
Yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah, I understood that.
So what happens is you now come up with a list of 100.
Mm-hmm, got it.
And that list, you get their email, you get their physical addresses.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And you start writing personal notes.
Got it. Okay.
And then so you have their address on a FedEx envelope. You have a personal note.
Mm-hmm.
When the book comes in, what you do is if there's a particular aha message or component of the book that's relevant for them, you put a little sticky pad on that.
Okay.
In your personal note, you say, hey, by the way, check out aha number 54. This is relevant for you. Or I've seen your business. This section is particularly relevant for you. Got it. Send out the books. Now, if you had a good marketing person, you could drop pixels and make sure your images are everywhere.
Okay, right? So the 4 months have now elapsed. I now have these 100 books in my hands, in addition to anything else that I want to keep in storage. But I have those 100 books in hand, and now I'm mailing out these 100 books to my 100 prospects that have.
You are doing a personalized autograph. You already have the note on the inside. You're mailing out the books.
Okay. Yep.
And then. Hey, there are some people who will just call back because in your note, you're going to say, hey, please give me a call or schedule time. And then you're going to follow through with the people who don't.
Okay. Got it.
And somewhere, so within 2 to 3 weeks, you'll probably pick up your first client from that. Depending on how much you charge, that'll probably be the initial 1x ROI on the investment. It might take you 2 or 3, depending on what you charge. It may take a half a client, right?
Right. Exactly.
And then I'd say typically within 2 to 4 months, most people have talked about a 2x to 10x double of their income because their Dream 100, some percent of them have come through and said, hey, let's talk.
It's interesting. I took the same formula as I was comparing side by side how this works in the podcasting space, and very similar to what you're doing with books. I think that Strick and I have done in the podcast production business, and not that I'm pitching my business here. I'd rather talk about what you do, but it's amazing. It's the same outcome. It's the same idea. It's like once you launch a podcast, now you have your top 100 list. You're going through your top 100 list. We never called it that. We just said, what's your target list of potential clients that you want to have on your show? Potential guests. Guest equals clients in our world. So having those people come through our system, and it's the same thing. You're going to end up probably selling somewhere in the area of 10%, 5 to 10% of those people into your services, and each one being worth $5 to $10,000 in your pocket. So you really can have, a $50,000 to $100,000 win by having a podcast. You could probably have a $50,000 to $100,000 win by writing your own book. And it always, in this particular case, if you even do a half decent job of here's the key, actually sending out the books, it's going to be key. Second, following up. You have to be diligent about your sales process as well. It's not just about having the book written and just say, world, here I am with my best-selling book.
Life doesn't work that way. But yes, if you're diligent with the sales process, and now here's the cool part. This is what we'll talk about when we turn off the recording. Are the people who come in, they do the podcast, and after they have a guest, they send them the book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's key. It really is key. It's so good to just not only have this high visibility piece, but the entire process that's in place. So is it as important as the book itself? How much do you share with your client about the follow-up and the process of the marketing and the sales, or is that just not something you get involved in?
That's the piece so what we do, I do something extremely well, and I'm very focused. And so I am always on the lookout for amazing partners who can have systems together that follow through in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have somebody who could help compile and execute on the Dream 100 and follow through.
Right.
I've not found that person yet. That's kind of interesting, right?
Well, it is. It seems like to find that again, Nice Guy community members, if you're out there and you have somebody in your world, in your circle of influence that does that, sales process, sales systems. I mean, that is totally an area where, like, an awesome JV partner of Mitchell's, I'm sure Mitchell would probably.
And so imagine this. We would just sell the package.
Right.
So it'd be whatever the book is plus the Dream 100 execution.
Right.
And we would just sell that as is.
Yeah.
And, same sort of thing, Doug, what you and I should talk about is we should sell a package, just a podcast and book. Right. And so, and then what we want to add to that over time are elements that bring more value to the customers that we're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's somewhere in there's probably not that we need one more program or one more system to process, to create, but I don't know that I'm not 100% convinced that it's something that is outside of our zone of genius anyway, because both of us as entrepreneurs, I do think this is an opportunity for us to maybe create a system together. I mean, I do sales training. I know you know a lot about the sales process. I know that I know a lot about the sales process as well.
Sales training.
So I'm thinking, maybe there is something in here somewhere. So we'll talk about this. See, Nice Guy community, again, podcasting, great to get the message out, but the idea, and I shout about this all the time, not literally shout, but I talk about this all the time as a part of your growing your business, is collaboration, joint venture partnerships, affiliate relationships. Those are the three biggest ways that we use to monetize our podcast. And I know that these are ways that you guys can all focus on building your businesses as well. So Mitchell and I have just done a little bit of that in action. So I don't know if there's any takeaways from that perspective that you have. If nothing else, the idea of using your book to be launched as a high visibility piece, using Mitchell's services to be able to provide that as well. Mitchell, what's the best way for those in our community that have the symptoms and you are now the surgeon and you're going to fix it? What's the best way for them to reach out and get in touch with you?
I do like the way you present that.
Thanks.
So best way is my name. So MitchellLevy360.com. So it's MITCHELLLEVY 360.com. You immediately see a customer testimonial video so you can hear from other people. You can connect to me on social media. And if this is interesting to you and you want to talk about it, you could book time directly on my calendar. And that's MitchellLevy360.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Mitchell, thank you for sharing everything that you're all about, your inspiration, your sense of humor, and Nice Guy community. I would record what's going to happen after this interview is over, but I think you're probably going to find out some programs that we are going to be. I know Mitchell and I are destined to be able to work together somehow. So there may be some other programs that we'll bring him back on and discuss. So Mitchell, thanks for being on the show today. Thanks, man.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Nice Guy community, never underestimate the power of nice. Again, special thanks to Mitchell Levy. All of his information, including access to his website and everything that's in there that we talked about, will be right there in the show notes. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. Fill up your week with the Nice Guys. Well, there's always money in the banana stand.